Greetings and good morning, gentlemen. I got a good one for you today. This one doesn't come up as much for me anymore because of the frame that I hold, but I still see it come up for a lot of men, and I don't think a lot of you guys even realize this is happening. So I want to shed some light on the subject, and I want to give you some useful practices on how you can not fall into this trap. And the trap is unqualified, unsolicited advice. It is your responsibility to hold frame for your space, for your field. You are the king of your space and anything that comes and goes from it. And throughout the course of the day, you're going to end up in these conversations. And people are going to give you a lot of their opinions. And most of the time you probably didn't ask for them. And most of the time the people that do this tend to not actually even be qualified to give you their opinion. Because that's what it is. It's an opinion. It's not an experience. And so I'm going to give you some examples of unqualified advice that have occurred not long ago in my life. And I'm going to give you some practices on how I handled them. And then I'm going to give you some examples of some unsolicited advice. And I will tell you these two are usually paired together. Usually anybody that's willing to give you unsolicited advice is very rarely actually qualified to do so. And then I'm going to give you some healthy examples of when it's okay to receive this kind of advice. And I'm going to use a lot of gym analogies here today. I've got one or two fathering experiences that are pretty on point for this as well. But I was... About a month ago, I was at the gym and I was working out with my son. And we had both just finished our set and we were taking a little breather in between. And this guy walks up to me. And this dude probably weighs about 150 pounds soaking wet. He's just skin and bones. And he starts telling me, I think we were working back that day, and he starts telling me about some back exercise. And looking at the guy, it didn't look like he really had results. So there's two key things here. One, I didn't ask this human for help. Not once did you hear me say, hey buddy, what do you do? That never occurred because very rarely do I do that. I go to qualified sources. But for two, just looking at him, it didn't look like he was quite qualified based on his stature to even be talking about the thing. So he got about halfway through explaining this exercise to me. And I just looked at him and I just said, how long have you been practicing this exercise and what kind of results do you have? And his head immediately dropped to the floor. And he just stared at his feet for a second. And he looked up at me and like this quivering little voice, he said, well, I've never actually done that exercise. So that was my world. That was my workout. And in that case, I had somebody under me that I was responsible for, and that's my son, to teach him best practices. Now, this could be at the gym. This could be out in your daily life. This could be anywhere. This is applicable no matter where you go. But you see what happened there. That human came into my field. I did not ask him for advice. He started giving me advice. And he wasn't qualified, A, based on his stature, and B, he wasn't qualified because he'd never even done the fucking exercise himself. It was something that he saw on like a video or a magazine or something, but he'd never tried it himself. He'd never seen, is it possible to get results from whatever this thing was? And so I just said, Henry, that's my son's name. I said, Henry, we got another set. Let's get back to it. And I left the conversation just like that. Now, I know some of you are already being like, well, Aaron, that was kind of a dick move, And I don't view that as a dick move to protect my space. You don't have to be an asshole about it. You don't have to be condescending about it. But you do have to have some audacity. You do. And what's the definition of audacity? Willing to take bold risks. And in that moment, yeah, I agree. That was pretty bold of me to respond that way. But it was also pretty bold of someone to come into my world without me asking them to then give me advice that they weren't even qualified to give me. I'm going to give you another example. And this one is so potent, because it actually came from a personal trainer. So I got this body scan done, right? see what my body fat percentage is, percent of muscle on my body, all of that. And I had asked him for feedback on the results to make sure I was understanding them correctly, because I knew he was quite proficient in the actual piece of equipment that does the scan. That's all I'd asked this human for. And it turned out that he was the same age I am. And then he shared with me, my body fat percentage came back at 6%. And he came back to me, and I just wanted to make sure I was understanding the results right, because from a guy that at once weighed 300 pounds, it was pretty shocking for me to actually be that low. So I had gotten it done a second time and had asked for somebody that knew this piece of equipment inside and out. Was I interpreting the results properly? You know, I gave him consent to give me advice on something that I knew he was trained in, because he'd like certified in this piece of equipment. That makes him qualified to give me advice on the results. But see, that's where it should have stopped, and it didn't. So he starts going on and on that he's the same age I am, but that he could never achieve that kind of body fat percentage. And he ends up going into detail about how he still falls asleep at night eating boxes of, I think it was like Lucky Charms and Pop-Tarts or something like that. And then he immediately goes into telling me what he would do to change my diet if I wanted to add a few more calories, put on a little more muscle, you know, keep growing. And at that point, it instantly hit me. This human is not qualified. He's the same age I am. He just admitted that he can't achieve the results that I've achieved. I didn't ask him for nutritional advice. I only asked him to interpret the results of this piece of equipment. And so after he finishes telling me what he would do with my nutrition if I wanted to keep growing, I just looked at him and I said, you know, if I follow your suggestions, will I look like you? And I know that can come across as another dick move, but I don't view it as a dick move. I view it at that point in time as me needing to protect my field. I'm not open to unqualified, unsolicited advice. You already told me you can't do what I'm doing right now, so how could I trust you to get me to the next level? I'm going to go to someone that's more qualified than I am, that's already gotten what I've gotten and gone to the next level, if I wanted to keep going. You're already assuming I wanted to grow, or that I had deemed there to be a problem with where I was at. There were a lot of assumptions made. Now I'm going to give you a couple examples of how to handle this the right way, because there's probably a chance that you might be giving people unqualified, unsolicited advice as well. And I know I use a lot of gym analogies, but again, these are all appropriate in the real world too. No matter what you're doing, this applies. So I was doing this exercise one day for my shoulders, and I just finished a set and put the bar down, and I heard a voice behind me, and he said, "Hey, would you mind if I showed you something?" Notice, already off the bat, he's asking for consent. Now, my spidey senses are going off here, because I know how people get at the gym. People like to go in there and tell other people what they think they should be doing when they really have zero fucking clue, right? You've probably all experienced this. And I'm not little by any stretch of the imagination. I hover somewhere between 210, 215 pounds, single digit body fat. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm not little. And I turn around and I gotta look side to side because this dude is so wide. And I kind of gotta scan up and down a little bit. I feel little now looking at this human that's behind me. It's like imagine turning around and you've got Ronnie Coleman or Arnold or Jay Cutler standing behind you. Thor wielding his fucking hammer. That's who's behind me. And he's in a tank top. And I noticed some scars on his shoulders. And he's a little bit older than me. And so automatically, he asked for consent. And I can tell this dude's qualified because he's just completely, he's shredded. He's huge. This dude's a monster. He's a little bit older than me. I see the scars on his shoulders. I happen to be doing a shoulder exercise. I bet this dude's about to drop some fire, right? So I said, I would actually love to hear what you have to say. But that kid over there, that's my son. Can we pause this for a moment so I can go get him to come listen too? Because I'm sure whatever you're about to say is worthy of both of us hearing. And so he proceeds to tell me about his shoulder surgeries. And he says, for the most part, I wasn't necessarily, in his eyes, doing anything wrong, but he made a few tweaks to the exercise that I happened to be doing to put less strain on his shoulder, because over time he could tell the impact on his shoulder, and some of that is what led to him needing to have surgeries. And I reflected back to him the tweaks that he shared with me, and I said, what I'd love to do is for me to do the exercise with you watching, and I'd love to do the exercise. I'd love to let my son then try it with you watching, so that you can then critique us. You know, this is thousands of dollars of wisdom and experience that I'm getting within a 5-minute period here. That's an appropriate way to offer somebody a suggestion if you want to. And somebody that actually respects you, somebody that's actually qualified, they're going to ask you for consent before they just start dropping something on you. Somebody that's qualified, they're likely already going to know that they should ask for consent. They're not going to just come blowing into your field of vision and trying to tell you how you should be doing things. So, that's the practice I have for you today. When's the last time you've actually practiced getting advice from a qualified source, and one that's not just unsolicited, who's just driving by, essentially throwing their opinions out at you? When's the last time you've actually practiced having a protocol that gives you a filter of qualification for anything that comes into your world? Because remember, you're the king of your space. It's your responsibility to hold your frame. It's your responsibility to protect your field from these kinds of things coming and going. And I will tell you, once you have a formal protocol in place, once you actually develop a filter of qualification, the amount of this stuff that actually enters your world, it gets so much smaller. Like, people can just feel already like, oh, that dude's probably not even available for some kind of whatever nonsense I'm about to spew at him. And they don't even realize they're spewing nonsense. They don't even realize half the time that that's what they're doing. They think they're trying to be helpful. I know that's the position that they're coming from, but the truth is they're not. It would be like me taking advice on parenting from someone that's never actually raised kids. And I know there are plenty of people out there that have plenty of opinions on what raising kids is like. I actually met a counselor one time who counseled parents, and I remember asking him, I said, do you feel qualified for this? And he said, well, why wouldn't I? I said, because you're not even married and you don't have any children. How would you be, what qualifies you? And he said, well, I was a kid once. That qualifies me. No, brother. No, brother, it doesn't. There's a big difference between being a kid and raising a kid. There's a big difference between being a kid and modeling what you should do for a child. All the different phases of development they're going to go through. Sure, you gain a little bit of experience looking back at your own childhood. But when the rubber meets the road and you actually have to apply that shit, just because you know something doesn't mean you can teach it. Just because you know something doesn't mean that you can transmit it. Back in 2009, when I was homeless and it was time for me to face the chemical dependency issues that I had going on, did I just get anyone's opinion? No, I went to people that were qualified to deal with something like that. When I weighed 300 pounds and it was time for me to face up and do something about that, did I just take anyone's opinion? No, I went to qualified experts in the industry on what were the best training practices for me, how to heal my relationship with food. When it came time to really step up and be more of a father, did I just go to anybody and take anyone's willy-nilly advice? No. I went to men that had successfully raised children in my eyes, and I started doing what they did. That's what I got for you guys today. I know it's going to make you step up a little bit more to implement this. I know you're going to have to be a little more bold, but I also know that you can do it, and I also know the results that you get on the other side of it. I know the peace that comes into your world. You're not going to be going off on all these dummy missions for all this willy-nilly advice anymore. You're not going to be distracted over here and over there. You're going to be a lot more focused from this. And in that focus, you're going to find out a lot more about who you are and what you want and why you're doing it. It's going to help you become the man that you always needed. I love you guys. I'll see you at the next practice. As always, you're only as good as your last practice. When's the last time you practiced having a filter of qualification?